And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is the power rankings for MLR week number 10. We are already at week 10 of the 2022 season. It has flown by so quickly. Week 10 is already in the books. An exciting week of games. The games were a little predictable, as evidenced by the Super Brew picks, which I'll go into in the next video. A certain somebody had a pretty good week. But again, we'll go into the video on that in the next one. The games were predictable, but they're still very, very good. A lot of very close games. So there's a little bit of movement in the rankings. Very slight. I don't think anybody moved further than 2 or 3 spots. So not a lot of change, but again, some very exciting games and an interesting development in the movement of a certain team that, again, if you're new to the power rankings, the way that they work, it's based purely on the performance on the pitch. It has nothing to do with your record. It has nothing to do with the table on the standings, who is in first place or who's in second. That has nothing to do with it. It's all about who had the best performance that week, who looked like the best team in Major League Rugby, and it's reflected in the power rankings. So, again, there's going to be a team that's going to be a little bit up there, even though their ranking's not the same or reflects the similarity to the power rankings. But again, that is the power ranking. It's all about what you've done on the pitch that week. It doesn't matter what you did prior. It doesn't matter how your season started, and especially with Major League Rugby. There are teams that start off really, really well and are starting to really tank throughout the season. And again, the season in rugby in any league, it's all about attrition. It's all about who can really field the healthiest team. Maybe not the most talented team, but the healthiest team by the end of the season when we start to get into the playoffs. There's a lot of news of a lot of players kind of coming in to teams. Teams are scrambling to sign some big names from overseas to fill in roster holes, to fill in for injuries. So the teams that started the season may not be the same team that is finishing the season, as we'll see as the weeks start to develop further into the season. But enough talk. Let's start getting into the rankings. Number 13 has not changed. It is, again, the new kids on the block, the Dallas Jackals at number 13. Kind of wanted to give them a little bit of a boost. They played against a very good Sabercats team for, again, another game in the Texas series between all 3 Texas teams. Dallas was actually leading at one point, 6-5, and then the Sabercats just started opening up, dropping 19 straight points unanswered by the Dallas Jackals. So not enough to move them up, even though the effort was there, keeping them at number 13 for right now. Number 12, the only team that was on the bye during week number 10, a much-needed bye for the Utah Warriors. There has been some development with the coaching staff for Utah, which I'll go into more in detail in the next video because it'll come into play with a very interesting development with the next video. But they are sitting at number 12 because they didn't play. They don't move up. They don't move down. A team, though, that is going to move down one spot is NOLA Gold, who are winless at home so far in the 2022 season, which is a little shocking. They're the only team that kind of proves that the home field advantage does not exist, at least in 2022. They were playing a very competitive game with a very strong opponent, Rugby ATL. Damian Stevens, I feel the game was at first pretty close. NOLA is not with one of their best players, Carl Myers. Damian Stevens is their backup fly half, who is also kicking. He was 0 for 3 off of the tee, which I feel, again, in the end, those points really didn't matter. But near the halfway point, that would have made the game a lot more competitive, maybe change the tempo and the energy of the game, especially at home. But by the last 20 minutes, the game was pretty much done. Fans were going home. NOLA was defeated, and they slide a loss at home. Granted, against a very tough ATL team, but again, not a very good showing for NOLA, especially when you look at who's going to be above them, and that is the team that's also looking for their only win so far in the season, Old Glory DC, who's bounced up a spot despite losing at the number 10 spot. And it's interesting because their game was very, very competitive. They were down quite a bit against Toronto in Toronto, which is not an easy place to travel to, even though DC is a little bit closer to Toronto, but still not an easy place to play. And yet, Old Glory, a team that has just lost their head coach and is dealing with a lot of turmoil internally, actually kind of looks like a better team in the last couple of weeks. They played Rooney very close, only lost by 2 or by 4, actually, I'm sorry. And now they lost to the Arrows by only 5. So the last 2 games that Old Glory has played, which coincidentally are the last 2 games that they lost their head coach, Andrew Douglas, they've actually played better. So, again, this is going to play into some interesting developments when Old Glory goes against the Utah Warriors next week. 2 teams that have a lot of similarities recently. But Old Glory, even though they have not won a game yet, are above 2 teams that have wins in the season. But again, power rankings are all about how you're doing now. NOLA's not looking very good. Utah is looking horrible. Dallas is also a team that hasn't won yet. Old Glory, out of these 4 teams, is actually the team that has looked the best. Moving on to number 9, Seattle, the 2-time MLR champions, the Seattle Seawolves. They played against a very tough New England Free Jacks, despite the loss of Kieran Joyce and AJ Alatimu, who is their starting fly half, and I believe their top scorer is dealing with some injuries. He came off the bench despite the injuries for Seattle, made the game very competitive, and actually came within 2 points of one of the hottest teams in MLR, the New England Free Jacks, at New England. Seattle Seawolves come away with the loss, but because the loss was so good and so competitive, I didn't feel they deserved a reason to slide down, so they stayed at the number 9 spot. Moving down a spot is the San Diego Legion, who hosted the Austin Gilgronis, another very, very tough team. This was a very, very competitive game, very, very chippy, a lot of very hard hits, a lot of scores. At the beginning, San Diego was very, very competitive. We're actually leading Austin 11-3, but unfortunately, when the second half came in, they lost 21-35. At 18-10, they were at halftime. They were up 11-3 at one point, then fell behind 18-10, or actually were ahead 18-10 by halftime. By the second half, only were able to score 3 points off of a penalty kick and ended up losing 21-35 at home. So a good start, but then just completely fell apart by, again, an Austin team that has been very dominant at the beginning of the season and then really started becoming this team that comes very slowly out of the gate and then turns it on in the second half. I don't know if that's by design. I don't know if it's because of the makeup of the team, but it gets the results done. And San Diego, unfortunately, in a very tight Western Conference race, loses a very, very important game to the Austin Gilgronis and slides down 1 spot to number 8. Also sliding down a spot, and I'll be honest, kind of generous, but I felt there's a lot of factors into this loss, which, again, we calculate being away from home, travel, strength of the opponent, a lot of factors, and that is Rugby New York sliding down just 1 spot to number 7 after taking a thrashing by your reigning and defending MLR champions, the LA Guiltinis. A game I was unfortunate to not be able to attend because of work, and I feel really bad because That was a really great game to watch. The LA Guillotine dominated Rooney 43-0. I'll go into a little bit more details of the game on the Guillotini side, but man, Rugby New York looked flat. This is the second time that they struggled in as many games. As I mentioned before, they struggled quite a bit against Old Glory in their last game. Before this game, they were able to walk away with the win, but in this one, not so much. Again, could be because of the travel. It's a long travel going coast to coast. It's going from East Coast all the way to West, literally farthest two distance from the country, New York to LA. It's not an easy travel. LA did the same thing the prior season and got beat by New York. And yeah, it was just a very, very bad beating for New York. But LA is starting to look like a great team. As I mentioned before, there are teams that start out really bad at this beginning of the season and are now finding their form. Players are coming back healthy. They are getting new players. Rooney is looking very beat up, and LA is looking very much healthy. So the results are on the scoreboard. But those factors play in. Rooney just slides one spot down to number 7. Going up 2 spots, the highest jumper this week is the Houston SaberCats, going from number 8 to number 6. Going against a, it's not the most impressive opponent to go against with the Dallas Jackals, but still a very strong win. They struggled with the Dallas Jackals at first, but then dropped 19 unanswered points to run away with the win 31-6. Now, granted, it does help that Rooney was really, really bad. San Diego lost as well. Seattle lost as well. So, again, sometimes some teams slide. That allows other teams to move up. Houston kind of gets that benefit. But a win is also a win. And even though a win against a very, very poor team, no offense to Dallas, like the Dallas Jackals, they get to go up a couple of spots. But just a couple. So they are up to number 6. Number 5 is moving down a spot is the Toronto Arrows. And even though they won at home, it was a very, very close game against a winless team in Old Glory, DC. So this is one of those rare occasions where a team that wins, and congratulations to the Toronto Arrows, first home win in over 1,000 days, because they haven't been able to play at home until last week. And they weren't unfortunately able to win that week, but now they did. They struggled against a winless team like Old Glory, and because of who was number 5 originally, get the benefit of jumping up to number 4. The power rankings plays this way. Toronto slides down to number 5, and to be honest, I'm kind of happy with it. It makes a lot of sense because who's number 4? The LA Guillotines. Moving back into the top 4 after pretty much like 8 weeks, amazingly. You're defending and reigning MLR champions, finally getting into the top 4 of the power rankings. A 46-0 thrashing of rivals Rugby New York. First shutout in franchise history, the most points scored in a shutout in MLR history. And these facts are, I'm going to make a quick shout out and plug to a very, very informative Instagram account called MLR Stats. I'll put the information in the description of the video. But follow them. They're a great follow. They have a lot of great facts and figures. They're the ones that brought up the attention that this is the biggest margin of victory in a shutout in the history of MLR. It's the very first by the LA Guillotines. And surprisingly to myself, this match was for the Champagne Cup, which is not traditionally how derby rolls are done, but a little bit different with MLR, I guess. Traditionally, the Champagne Cup a Derby Cup can only be won at the venue of the current holder of the cup, which the current holder is Rugby New York. So technically, the only way the Guillotines can win the cup is if it's played in New York. It was played in LA, but for whatever reason, they considered the cup theirs. Which, again, kind of plays a little bit weird into MLR because you'll have rivalry games where you'll have 2 games in a series rather than just 1. So the cup can literally jump back and forth. So don't know if MLR will address that issue. We'll see with some of the other games coming up. But for right now, LA owns the Champagne Cup. They own the California Cup, which they beat San Diego, which they defended at home. and they hold the MLR shield, so they have a lot of hardware in their trophy case, which, of course, for an LA fan like myself, pretty happy about. So they move up one spot to number 4. Number 3, now the top 3, a little bit of a mix-up, only because some of the wins were not as impressive as others. Again, power rankings, it's who I felt was the best team that week number 10. And this is how the top 3 bottomed out. At the bottom, number 3, sliding down a spot, is the New England Free Jacks, who are arguably the hottest team in MLR. Currently riding on a 5-game win streak. They struggled quite a bit against Seattle. And in a game that was at New England, in Quincy Stadium, Veterans Stadium in Quincy, they struggled quite a bit with Seattle. Seattle is a lower-ranked team, and for a team that's been as hot as the Free Jacks, who have kind of sputtered out a little bit in the last couple of games, it is a little concerning. Again, teams are starting to have a lot of injuries. It's all about who has the more capable players on their roster in the end. Depth of the bench will be important. Free Jacks, this is also going to come important because unfortunately one of their best players, Dougie Fife, looked like he picked up an injury. We'll see what the condition is. It looked like it was a rib injury during the game. If he's out for a couple games, it's going to be huge for the New England Free Jacks. We'll see what happens in the future. But right now, they slide down a spot to number 3. Sliding up a spot because of that is Austin Gilgronis, who are at number 2. And they struggled a little bit with the Legion. They made a lot of penalties and errors that allowed the Legion to take over. And then, like I said, in the second half, just completely dominated San Diego. It looked like a completely different team. They've done that more than once. The LA game is a great example of that. And it was an impressive enough win. Definitely more impressive than the New England-Seattle game that I gave Austin the win. Plus, Austin was at San Diego, so I allowed them to jump over the Free Jacks. That leaves number 1, who actually stayed number 1 this week, Rugby ATL, who played against NOLA Gold. And, again, it wasn't the prettiest game, but it was definitely a pretty good game. Better game than Austin's, better game than the Free Jacks. And even though NOLA isn't the greatest teams, according to the power rankings, I didn't feel there was enough for ATL to slide down, especially after a win, and especially after a pretty good win. So Rugby ATL still stays on top. So a little bit of movement, not a whole lot. Again, you'll find that with the power rankings, especially with games between opponents that are more closer to the bottom or closer to the top. It just is, again, pretty interesting to see a team like Old Glory, who's looking for their first win still, kind of creeping up to the top. But again, it looks like ATL, Austin, New England, and LA are going to start being the dominant teams right now. That competition in the West is heating up. Even though it doesn't look like it here, the competition in the East is pretty fierce as well between between ATL, Free Jacks, and Rooney is a pretty big competition in the East. The West has AG, Guillotinis, Toronto, Houston, and San Diego are literally right behind points-wise, not so far behind in the power rankings. So, as always, those are the power rankings. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you agree, if you disagree, if your team made it, let me know. And as always, thank you very much for checking out my video, and I will see you on the pitch.